When a man marries a lady, whether she is a virgin or she is it's her second marriage, or she's not a virgin, whether she is an adult or a child, whether she is a daughter of a Jew or she's a convert, or she's a freed slave. If you free a slave, they become fully Jewish. He needs to do 10 things, and he gets 4 things. The 10 things, 3 of them are from the Torah. Shh, please. 3 of them from the Torah. It says, She'ira ksusa v'inasa. She'ira means her food. Ksusa means her clothing. And Einasa means he has to have relations with her. He can't refuse to have relations with her. And we'll actually talk about soon how often that needs to be. There's 7 rabbinical things, and these are all of the Bezdin origin. One of them is he has to give her a ksuba. He has to give her the ksuba again as a promise of an amount of money. So even if he doesn't have the money, that's okay, right? Like he might be paying alimony. He might be paying it for years, his ksuba. But he has to promise the original amount of the ksuba that we said in the last chapter. All right. He has to, if she gets sick, he has to heal her. If she becomes captive, she becomes a hostage, he has to redeem her. He has to bury her after she dies. After he dies, so according to Jewish law, the wife doesn't have any right to the inheritance. However, she has right to survive from the inheritance. So, in other words, let's say he leaves $1 billion, she gets a certain amount, which is calculated as a widow, or a certain amount of money to support her. And also the daughters have that, so those are under the wife's obligation. So he has the obligation to support her daughters. The sons, they get the sons get the ksuba more than the Yerusha if there are brothers from other wives. So let's say the mother dies, and here, Mr. Shana, please stop talking. Let's say there's other wives. So now the husband has money. Now the wife gets to get the ksuba, right? Now their mother died. So now they split the estate of the father, but her sons get her ksuba worth. And there are 4 things that he gets. Whatever she does, whatever work she does, the money belongs to him. If she finds something, she finds a diamond, it belongs to him. He can eat. Let's say she inherited a field, or she came in with money, so he gets to use the field. He gets to use the field, although he doesn't necessarily die. And if she dies during his lifetime, he inherits her, and he inherits before everybody else. Another thing the rabbi said, that the work of the lady is balanced with her sustenance, her food, and her redeem is balanced with her peiros, the fruit of her property, and the burial is balanced with the ksuba and the inheritance. Therefore, if she says, you know what, I am not going to eat from you, I'm not going to work, you can listen to her. And you don't force her to work, and you don't force him to feed her. However, if he says, I am not going to feed you, and I will not take your work, you support yourself, we don't listen to him. Maybe it's not enough. And so basically she has the power to say, hey, I'm making much more money than I'm making out of this marriage, so therefore I am not going to give you what I worked for, and you don't feed me. But he cannot say that. He cannot say, hey, you make so much money and I'm feeding you, it's coming off my income, let it come off your income. He cannot say that. But on the other hand, he gets her income, right? So, okay. All these things, even though they're not written in the ksuba, and even though he didn't write a ksuba, he married her without a ksuba, he gets all 4 of these things, and she gets the 10 things, and he doesn't need to say it. They are default. If he says, I will get married to you on condition that I don't have to pay your food, or she says that you don't get one of the things that I have, they're married. Except for the 3 things which are biblical. Those things, the 3 things which are biblical, and if you do those things, then they're not considered married. The conjugal rights, the ksuba, and the inheritance. For example, let's say he says, I will get married to you, that on condition you don't get the conjugal rights and you don't get the relations you deserve. Now, as we'll say later, the Rambam will go through. There are different professions, and based on those professions and based on those lifestyles, the rights are different. So we'll see that soon. If he says to her, on condition we don't have relations that, according to your rights, then he's considered married, and the Tanai, the condition is just a non-starter. Because you can never go make a condition against what it says in the Torah. If he says, how about I'll get married, that I have to pay you less kasuba, or then that is also, the rabbis made it very, very strict that a kasuba has to be the minimal amount that the rabbis established, which is 200 dinar for a virgin and 100 dinar for a second marriage. And therefore, if he goes against it, they're not married, and if they have relations, that is considered like zunus. That is considered as if it's not marital relations. Okay, next law. Let's say, now I just want to tell you, these laws of conditions are very, very hard, very confusing. If he says, you will not, if he says, on condition that you will not inherit. Now again, she doesn't get the estate, but she gets her food and she gets her sustenance, right? Even though this is rabbinical, the rabbis were very strict on this. And even though it's money, but other things, there were certain conditions that the rabbi said are not so strict, but there are certain things the rabbi said are very, very strict. How much food do you have to give her? You have to give her bread for 2 meals a day, which is an average meal, which with no sicknesses involved. And from that thing, if it's wheat, barley, rice, porridge, any of those things. And he has to give her oil to light candles and fruits, and a little bit of wine to drink if it's a place that women drink wine. And according to the Rambam, wine is a necessity at meals, helps you digest. I don't know exactly, like the wine then from halachic status was very different than nowadays. But so I don't know, and the diet was different. But if people drink wine by every meal, then you have to give her wine. And you give her 3 meals on Shabbos, and meat and fish on Shabbos, right? And you give her every Shabbos a amount of silver for her needs, to bathe, to use whatever she needs to launder and bathe. When do we say this? By a poor person. But if he's very wealthy, then he has to give according to his wealth. He has to, if she needs to eat meat and delicacies every day, then we force him to do it. And if he's poor and he can't give her bread, we force him to give her what he needs. And now again, let's say the wife is understanding of her husband and they're open and I can't afford and we'll try and make it through. But she has certain rights over him. In other words, she could say, hey, you're not taking care of me. Yeah. So again, we don't force him to divorce. She has the ability to force the Beis Din to force him, right? So that's the rights. In other words, if we're reading this biography of this rabbi who basically he opened the yeshiva and someone in the town said, oh, I'll support the rabbi, and he didn't end up supporting him. And they were very humble, and they almost died of starvation because the guy didn't end up doing it, and the city was very poor. In the end, the city put together money that they had real bare minimum things. So if a wife and husband have good peace in the home, they can work it out. But if, let's say, she feels he's not doing it, or she says, I can't live like this, and I'd rather divorce, then we can force them. Someone wants to give his wife food that's fitting for her, and they eat separately, that's okay. He can give her a bill and say, here, you eat in your house, I eat in my house. As long as he eats with her on Shabbos. You have to eat with her on Shabbos. Now again, all these laws are talking about what is your legal abilities. But if they decide they want to eat separately for whatever reason, they're welcome to do that. A lady who gives him mizonos, that he gave her food and there's leftovers go to the husband. If he's a Kohen, she could say, I don't want truma. Now this is interesting. Hey, Mushka, can you whisper? He could say, I want to give you truma, right? Now why is truma an advantage? Because he doesn't work for it and everyone has to give him truma. He could be very wealthy with truma. But she could say, I don't want it because truma can only be eaten if you're pure. And she says, I don't want to keep this, I don't want to keep the complex laws of purity on my food. Rather, he can give 50-50. He can say, okay, I'll give you 50 truma and 50 chulin, 50 non-consecrated food. That way that way you'll have half responsibility. Just like a person has to feed his wife, he has to feed his sons and daughters until they are 6 years old. From then, he feeds them. This is a rabbinical decree. And if he doesn't want to, they go and disgrace him in public. And if he still doesn't want to, they say so-and-so is disgusting, he doesn't want to feed his kids, and he's worse than a bird. A non-kosher birds at least feed their kids. And but we don't force him to feed his kids. When do we say this? Which we don't know. We don't know his financial worth, and we don't know if we need to give him tzedakah. But if we know that he has, so now we don't know his worth. But now let's say we know his worth and we know he can afford to feed his kids. So then we force it. He should be. It's like giving tzedakah, giving charity. Someone goes to another country and now this was common in the olden days, and we take for granted nowadays. We live pretty comfortably, like we live with our families. But in the olden days, maybe you need to go on a boat for a few months or a few years to make some money. So a guy went to another country, and a lady comes to him, and she says, a lady comes and she says to the rabbinical court, he didn't leave enough food for me. The first 3 months from the time he traveled, we don't give her food from his estate, because we assume that he's going to be back in 3 months. He'll take care of it in 3 months. However, afterwards, we can start selling stuff from his estate and go sell things and go take from his estate to feed her. And we do not calculate her work until her husband comes. Now, if we find when he comes that she was working, then he gets it. And then if she doesn't go to the Beis Din and she just sells herself, then that is a sale, and we don't need to. So these are okay. So basically, she has certain rights of demanding food, and if he comes back, he gets those rights. If you needed to sell things of him, and he has certain rights, and after he dies, we can calculate all these things into the ketubah and everything like that. Just like now, I just want to say it sounds like a real evil guy. But back then, when you travel, it was very difficult. You go on a wagon and you never know, you lose your money and you get stuck somewhere and everything like that. It wasn't always his fault. Sustenance and money was hard to come by. It wasn't like, go get a job, go pump gas or go work in a fast food place. Then there were not necessarily any jobs available and people had to do very difficult things. Just like the Beis Din can sell his estate. If a husband was away, they can also sell for the children, as long as they're less than 6. For more than 6, they can't do it, not in front of him. And similarly, if he becomes mentally deranged, the Beis Din could go and sell his thing and give his wife and children that are under 6 years old. There were Gaonim, again, the Gaonim are the previous generation before the Rambam, that taught that you don't give mazonos to a wife that her husband went or her husband died until the shtar ketubah, the ketubah is already calculated. And if you don't take that, she doesn't get food, because maybe she already took the ketubah, or she forgave the ketubah, and then she doesn't get food. And then some will say that you give her food, assuming that she didn't do anything with the ketubah, and that's what I think. Someone, her husband who went away, because he needs to support her from the Torah. So we assume that she didn't use out she didn't forgive or get rid of her ketubah, or didn't receive her ketubah right. Because again, the ketubah says that if he doesn't feed her, she can collect the ketubah. So it's conditional in the document. However, if the husband dies, you do not give her mazonos, you don't give her food until she brings the ketubah, because she's eating based on the rabbinical decree, and also because she's now going to be accepting food from the heirs. So what we want to do is we want to calculate, this is a husband who dies again. We want to calculate all these things. All these factors have to be calculated in.
She has precedence over the children.
Precedence for food. Yeah. So let's say the husband only leaves enough money for the wife to survive. then the children won't get the sustenance. However, if it's the opposite, if the husband's extremely wealthy, then she'll get her food and it might be not a lot, and then her children will get the lump sum. If the husband goes and she borrowed and ate, when he comes back, he needs to pay. If someone stood up and said, you know what, I'm going to support, here's this poor lady, let me support her. If the husband comes back, he doesn't have to. So if she borrows it, he has to pay it back. But if someone comes and says, you know, poor lady, I own the supermarket. This is the common story with bills in Jewish communities, where they just let certain people just take as much food as they need because they know they. So now he doesn't have to pay her back. The husband says, when he's leaving, take your work as your food. She doesn't get food because if she didn't want this, she wouldn't let him. She could have said, no, you can't go so fast. My work will not support me. If they're going in the Bezdin and they go to the Bezdin and he decides how much food he's going to give her, and the Bezdin sells something and gives it to her, or she sells it and the husband says, I left you food. So now, here's what happens, right? He says, I left you money for food. Why are you selling my property, right? So she went to the Bezdin. She says he didn't leave money for food. Now, the Bezdin goes, they sell his car.
So she's lying to the court?
Well, we'll see. So then he needs to swear that he did not leave for her. Now, again, swearing swearing in Judaism is something you swear holding a holy object. It's something that is supposed to scare people. It's supposed to be very serious. And then he has to swear that she has to swear, that he didn't leave anything for her. If he doesn't demand, doesn't sell, but she waits until he comes, he says, I left you, and she says, I didn't leave for you, I borrowed. Then she swears, he swears, and she has to pay back the obligation. So, a wife and husband, it's always important to go to a legal authority before you go and you make a move, because people have certain rights and they may be able to get out of it. If she sells movable objects and she says, I sold it for food, and he says, I left you food, so then he has to swear that she has to swear that he didn't leave. If he doesn't demand, she doesn't demand, and she doesn't borrow, and she doesn't sell, but she pushed herself and she eats, she can't say, okay, now pay me money because I starved for these few months. She doesn't have any rights. Now, let's say a guy says, I swear I want you to have no benefit from me. Whether he says until a certain time or not, we wait 30 days. If the 30 days pass, or he stops, then that's okay. Then we move on. However, if not, she automatically gets the ketubah. And in those months, the lady will work and eat, and she will... and someone of her friends, she'll try and get money from someone else. If she doesn't have enough, please whisper, Mendel. She doesn't have to. If her work doesn't give her sustenance. If someone says, I don't want you to eat anything from all the fruit, we wait 30 days. More than this, he gives her the ketubah. However, if he swears that she won't eat anything bad, even if if he swears that, however, even if he says, I swear you won't eat anything which is bad, after 30 days we give the ketubah. If she swears that she will not eat from any of his fruit, and she keeps it, or she says, I'm going to be a Nazarite, right, so she can't eat certain things, she sits. And if he says, I don't want Isha, I don't want a wife who's making promises like this, then she goes out, we give the ketubah, because he has the ability to so he says, hey, you swore on it, that's your fault. She has the ability, my husband has the ability to go and absolve a lady of her oaths. So it's really his fault, and therefore she will give the ketubah. The hope of the Rambam is that a husband and wife never get into these discussions.
It's interesting that there are very detailed laws there for them to...
Well, so So these are really like not really marriage issues. These are actually like rabbinical court legal issues because here you have a husband and wife and they're talking about their rights of which objects belong to who and what. Um, Typically we hope that people don't need to come on to the ketubah or come on to working out. There's a very famous story actually. So there's this rabbi named Rabbi David Shochat, and he's a big rabbi in Toronto. He's in his 90s, and he's still active. And so, interestingly enough, he one time was going to speak somewhere, and Rabbi Emmanuel Shochat was this brilliant rabbi who was probably the chief translator of Hasidism. He was a Swiss rabbi who lived in Toronto as well. So his brother was a professor, but also a rabbi, and he translated the most difficult section of the Tanya into English and translated dozens, maybe 50 books. And he was known to be the first. He would debate missionaries, and he's the authority on Christianity in the realm of Judaism. He died a couple years ago. His older brother, is still alive. He's in his 90s. So he one time said a story that he went and he was speaking in a college. He had an opportunity to speak somewhere, and he wasn't sure what to speak about. There were a lot of Gentiles there, and here's a rabbi. What should he speak about? So he asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, speak about charity, because charity is a positive, proactive mitzvah that all humanity can access. I made this Israel fund, and there's been someone who's semi-anonymously been donating so far over $8,000. Yeah, and I'll be honest, it's sometimes tough to let go, but I always pass it through. I'm trying to figure out who this guy is. So I finally found his address this morning. I finally found out, because I have his address. I finally found out and I have his name, but I finally found out how to reach him. So I just want to meet this person. I don't know who he is. Not a Jewish name, from Prescott. My Israel fund, I haven't really publicized so much. He's not on my email list. So that means he must have searched my website and
How did you find it?
He must have searched my website and found, he wants the Chabad or Israel Prescott or something. So anyways, giving tzedakah is very, very important. So this rabbi went and he came to this university and he gave this famous story of the Tosafos Yom Tov, that there was a guy who died and he was considered extremely wealthy but extremely miserly. So the whole community was so disrespectful. I mean, so many poor Jews, you're suffering and this guy's living it up. Anyways, after he dies, all these stories came out where people came and said, every morning, every Shabbos, I'd get a check. I don't know who it was from, and now it stopped. And so he said this story, and someone comes to him and they say, I'm going to like to speak to you after. So this guy comes over to me, he's a priest, and he says, my mother was a Holocaust survivor, but after the Holocaust, she gave up Judaism and converted to Christianity. But she always told me that you come from this rabbi who was named Rabbi Yom Tov Lippman Heller, who lived in the 1500s in Prague. You come from this rabbi where the story happened, so I want to share a story in our family tradition. So it turned out the priest was Jewish, and all because of the story and everything like that. And you can watch this interview online. He says this story. Yeah, I see, you're doing such a good job. He doesn't mention if the Rebbe told him to say that story. He says, I don't remember if the Rebbe told me to say that story, or the Rebbe told me to speak about charity, and that's the story I dug up. But anyways, I think one of the details in the story is there was a lady who, husband, he went on a trip for a long time, and his wife said, what am I going to eat? She said, that guy worked out with that businessman, he'll give you food. So she goes to him, and he says, what are you talking about, Or the secretary says, there's no business deal that you're supposed to get money. So they go to the guy, and the guy says, yeah, there is, I worked it out. Even though the guy left for several years, even though they had not spoken. But the guy understood what happened, and he said, obviously I don't want her to starve. So that was just an interesting story to remind me of.
So you think this guy might have Jewish in Judaism?
Oh, certainly he realized his mother was a Holocaust survivor. So when he heard the story, he realized that his mother had told him the story from their ancestors. And that was what he had to realize he was Jewish. Just, it had never occurred to her that maybe his mother was Jewish. So that was,
The local guy?
This guy, the local guy?
That's the story.
I have no idea. But, truthfully, even if a Gentile is obligated to give charity. as well, just like a Jew. In fact, it's a very interesting thing. There's a lot of Gentiles out there who are so careful with tithing their income, and they sometimes give their tithe to Chabad and Prescott or Chabad and other places, that it's sometimes awe-inspiring. Because, if someone's making an income which is a lower income, and they might be lower middle class, but they're actually tithing, they're potentially giving a lot more tzedakah than way upper middle class. I mean, if they're making $50,000 a year, which is barely enough to survive, and they're giving $5,000 charity a year, it's awe-inspiring in America. In Jewish law, that's your obligation. In law, you don't have to give a tithe if you're, you don't have to necessarily give a tithe. But many of them decide to. Okay, so can you take him out? Push the stroller away and take him out, and I'll come here. So if it is awe-inspiring sometimes when you see that. Now, so I don't know this guy. Maybe he's extremely wealthy. I told my wife, I said, specifically when you get money from like semi-anonymous sources, you have to make sure to document everything. In other words, even potentially lose the processing costs, because you never know when it's an honest guy, you won't get audited. But you never know if it comes from semi-anonymous sources. You have to be able to show, he gave this money. Look, this is literally the pizza or whatever that was bought in Israel. Literally the dinner that was catered in Israel for soldiers. Like literally, go speak to the guy in Israel. Go, I was just literally, So that's actually the irony of things. People sometimes think when money is anonymous, you don't know where it's coming from. But really, it's the exact opposite, because
I understand.
Really the risk factor is much stronger with anonymous people.
But it's still a very meaningful act.
I actually really want to call him, because I'm really touched. I'm really touched. That somebody, not only I didn't send the email out to him, he doesn't know me. He had to find it on his own. He went and he was touched by it. And the first time he sent money, I was kind of like, maybe it was a mistake, maybe he did it by mistake. And then he sent again and again. And it's funny because like my relative in Israel who I send money to, I'm kind of like, he can still use money, and I'm kind of like, look, it's like the hype is over, Hanukkah's coming, like I have things to do here, and he keeps sending me videos, and he always documents, whenever he buys something, he sends the receipt, and the receipt says Chabad of Prescott on it, so let's say it says,
So he's very meticulous.
well, meticulous, that's not legal meticulous. That's showing, he's just trying to show, I feel like he's trying to pinch me and say, hey, look, they bought
Sort of a guilt.
they bought $800 worth of books for soldiers. Books. So I asked him which books. It doesn't say on the receipt, but he said, there's a lot of requests, every type of Jewish person. He said there's a book that actually Bracha started studying on Monday with women. It's called The Gates of Trust. So he said that's like a top book that soldiers ask for, The Gates of Trust.
Really.
And he said they're Chabad Chassidim. Every Chabad Chassid wants a chitas. But it's kind of an interesting. I want to meet this guy. I'm kind of inspired by him.
Absolutely. He could provide. He could be a good example for the community.
Well, you never know.
On the other hand, maybe he doesn't want the publicity.
Yeah. Well, obviously, but for me, what's interesting about it is that when it comes to my website, I purposely didn't make a huge deal about the Israel Fund, because first of all, I need someone to donate, people to donate locally as well, for Chabad. Second of all, there's so many funds out there. Like, I'm not like, mine's not better or anything like that. Mine's just, I know the person who will use it, and I know how the person will use it, and that's just a nice thing that, it's nice that you're not on Facebook, but every week I put out videos on Facebook of soldiers saying thank you, and I have male soldiers, female soldiers, Hebrew, English, eating in Gaza, out of Gaza, and it's nice to be able to do that, to make the personal connection.
Absolutely. I it's part of your mission, I think, to be a conduit for local people.
Correct. But there are many ways of doing it. Like some people, like you'll go Magen David Adom, they all contact you and they all say, hey, can we make a page on our site for your locals,
Right.
And I've been standing strong with my relative. it was interesting. Many Chabad rabbis called me and said, like, how do I do that? And I said, look, I can give you my relative's phone number, but every Chabad rabbi, you have so many friends in Israel. I was in the bus at the Kinnis, and I was just talking to an American guy about the different stories and everything. And there was an Israeli guy in front of us, and he was kind of, whoa, 1 second, how do I do that? I said, look, just go to any guy here and say, hey, can you make a sub website which says Chabad of whatever city you are, because they're all doing it. They're all involved. Everyone's trying to help, and and
it's a mitzvah to do it, so you're participating in the mitzvah.
totally. Well, so I told him, I said, like, you don't need my relatives you can go and find somebody who like they're all everyone's able to use the money in a second. Whatever you give them, and they're all working together. Like whenever there's a need, they're passing it on. Like no one's making no one's taking a vacation on this. You know what I mean?
Certainly.
Like yeah.
Of course.
So it's like Okay. Anyways.
But a non-Jewish person doesn't have the same mechanisms. Like here, we have a Torah, we have a building, we have the shul itself, and we have Israel. So we have many avenues for tzedakah.
Yeah. Correct.
Whereas someone who's not connected,
Well, so you never know what they give to or what they do. But the reason why I wanted his information as well is like I wanted to, I have all these videos and receipts, and I have certificates from the IDF which say thank you to Chabad of Prescott from the IDF, and I wanted to, I like to share it with the community, and I wanted to share it with him. Okay, let's go. Let's start the parsha. So I want to note in the beginning of the parsha, there's a whole debate. It says, "Vayishlach Yaakov malachim." Yaakov sent angels. So Rashi, now who is he sending? Yaakov is told to go back to Esav, to go back to Israel, and he's going to bump into Esav. So he sends angels to Esav. Now there is a great debate about so he sends malachim. Now malachim means angels. It also can mean messengers. And Rashi says he sent real angels. He sent real angels. Now, there's a whole debate. Rashi is a simple commentary. Is it important to say real angels? Now, first of all, in the end of last week's parsha, Jacob meets with real angels. So it makes sense he sent those angels. But Rashi doesn't really need to say anything, because he could say, really like a lot of the other commentators, there's a lot of commentaries that comment on Rashi, and they note when they say, why does Rashi need to say that? Now, I saw one answer. He said because he's sending messengers to Esav. Esav's like violent. So he wouldn't sell real messengers, real humans as messengers, because that would be putting them at risk. And that's what Rashi is trying to explain here. Now, here is a very unique, famous Rashi, which I want to comment on, and then I'll give it over to, Balaturim, or it says, Vayitzav Sam Lemar. In verse 5, it says, he instructed them to say, Koi soimrun la'adoni le'esav. Go say to my master Esav. Koi amar avdecha Yaakov. So says your servant Jacob. Im Lavan Garti. I see there are two people watching, by the way, today. Im Lavan Garti. I lived with Lavan. And everywhere it's sojourn. So I lodged with Lavan, sojourned with Lavan. Garti. Ve'echar ata. And I have lingered with Lavan until now. So now Rashi notes, what does it mean in Lavan Garti? I live with Lavan. Why is that he's telling him that? Now, the word ger means a convert, but it literally means a stranger, right? So when we say a convert, we're saying somebody who we mentioned in the Ram today. There's that Bat Yisrael, the daughter. Now Bat Yisrael is or Ben Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael means the Jewish people. But if someone converts, they're not a son of Israel, right? They have their own stuff they brought to the table. So in Lavan Garti, he says, Loi nasisi sar v'chashav elager. I did not become a prominent officer. I was a stranger for all these years. Eincha kedai lishnai saisi al briches avicha. You shouldn't listen. You shouldn't hate me because I got Jacob's blessings, because Jacob's blessings were so great, but they didn't happen. Sorry, Isaac's blessings were so great, but they didn't happen. This is what he tells him. He says, I'm still a stranger. I'm still, even though he became very, very wealthy, in last week's story, it's kind of unique. He kind of runs out with a lot of wealth, but he's not getting any credit for it. Now, he's not becoming a sar of a chashuv, he's not becoming an officer or a governor. Then Rashi says this other thing, which is quoted from the Medrash, which is very interesting, and it has to do with our Kabbalah class that we learned last week. Davar achar garti begematria tarya. He says if you take the word garti has the numerical value of taryad. If you take garti is 3 plus 4 is 7. Garti 203. Reish is 200. Gimel Reish is 203. Tuf is 603, and Yud is 613. 613. So obviously 613 is a lucky number in Judaism.
Okay.
So Rashi says, Koloimar. In other words, Im Lavan Harasha Garti, I lived with Lavan Harasha. He says, I lived with Lavan the wicked, V'taryag mitzvah shamarti, and I kept all 613 mitzvahs. V'loi lamadati memaisav harayim. I did not learn from Lavan's evil ways. This is what he tells Esav. Tells him to tell Esav. He says, go tell Esav that I live with the evil Lavan. I didn't become the blessings of our father Isaac didn't propel me to become a special or a honorable officer or be in a prominent place. Just cash value was redeemed. And Taryag mitzvah shamarti, and I kept the 613 mitzvahs. And I still, even though I was living with Lavan, and Lavan is so wicked, I still did not fall into Lavan's ways. I still didn't fall victim to Lavan's ways. He didn't affect me. I still kept all 613 mitzvahs. So, the Rebbe asks, and this is not from a Rashi, a little perspective, but this is a midrash. What is the meaning of telling Esav that he kept all mitzvahs and he withstood Lavan's being wicked? Now, one might say that he's telling Lavan, hey, I'm pretty strong-willed, right? I lived with this wicked guy, and nothing rubbed off on me. I still kept all 613 mitzvahs. And he's telling Esav he's strong, but really, he might want to phrase that better by saying, I live with Lavan, and he was tricking me, and I withstood his scams. We know that Lavan kept scamming Jacob.
Or maybe he's just trying to humble himself in front of Esau because he's afraid of him.
Well, but what's he telling him? I kept all the mitzvahs. Esav doesn't care that he kept all 613 mitzvahs. He's hinting that out. So the Rebbe gives a very interesting perspective. He doesn't say, I kept all the mitzvahs. He hints that he kept all the mitzvahs. Rashi says, Koloimar. It's like to say that I didn't love and didn't get to me, and I kept all the mitzvahs. So based on the theme in Kabbalah regarding Esav and Yaakov, that Esav is really holier origin. And when he comes into the world, he comes from the shattered vessels, right? But he comes from a pre-holy origin, which has so much energy. It just hasn't been, the energy has not been used out and hasn't been able, the energies have not been able to be invested in vessels, so to speak. So when you take holy energy and you go and you invest it in vessels, you're able to do really good things in the world. But when you don't do that, you might end up doing really bad things. You might be using superpowers to go and do bad things. So Yaakov, it's Jacob's job to go, and we find that it's Jacob's job, and our job, it's Tikkun's job, to go and refix Tohu. And this is a underlying theme in the Zohar and all over the Chumash and all over Jewish history. And actually in the JLI book, it actually has a whole section of Esav and Jacob, going through each of these stories and everything like that. So this is what the Rebbe explains. He says Jacob, he's tested by a wicked person. And I spoke yesterday in Shavuos speech. He goes and Lavan really tests him out. How righteous is he going to be? And he succeeds it. Now Jacob feels, after I've done Lavan, maybe it's time to go and conquer even worse evil. Esav, now it's time to go and show Esav, hey, look, I elevated Lavan's place, and I elevated Lavan's sheep. Maybe I will go and elevate Esav's now. So he goes and he hints out to Esav. He tells Esav, look, I went on the spiritual journey. Now we're ready for you. What does Esav tell him? Esav kind of says, Esav doesn't get the hint. Ultimately, Esav doesn't get the hint. He's not ready. He's not ready to get the hint, and therefore Esav doesn't get this hint, and he doesn't. He just moves on with from Jacob. Later on, tries to mess with Jacob. Throughout history, tries to mess with Jacob. It's notable that the Rebbe in the 1992 spoke a lot about how Esav's progeny in the world have actually become pretty nice to the Jews. And he spoke about how France is known to be one of Esav's progeny, and French, they're not great when it comes to Arabic extremism. However, when it comes to Jews returning to Judaism and becoming Orthodox, France is very high tier. There's tons of Jews. In fact, if you go to France, it was quite remarkable when I was in yeshiva even. Almost all the shluchim were non-religious and brought by shluchim, went back to be shluchim, and their children, they went to yeshiva, and their children became shluchim, and their children's children, and the Rebbe noted that in 1992, that France has some of the greatest yeshivas and the greatest Jewish organizations, but that will happen fully when Mashiach comes. And actually, in the Haftorah of this week's Parsha, we read about the prophecy of Ovadia. That Ovadia talks about the final conclusion. Ovadia was from Esav, but talks about the final conclusion of Esav, the end of the story where Esav will finally be transformed to good or destroyed as evil. That's kind of how he finishes up. However, let's do the Baal HaTurim on this. There's a lot of really good gematrias. The Baal HaTurim and many of the commentaries seem to hint Isaac is so into Esav because he sees that Esav has the Oiris Mirubim. He has the infinite potential of greatness.
All right, so here's the first gematria. It says, it's also verse 5 that you pointed out. So, I have lingered until now. Jacob was telling Esau, if you will say, since you have kept the mitzvahs, you should feel self-confident, so come fight me. Know that I must linger so long that I will have lingered until the time alluded to by the word Ata. Ayin is 70 years of a Babylonian exile. Taf is 400 years of the Egyptian exile, and Hay is 5 millennia, after which will come the 6th millennium, the era of Mashiach.
Wow, that's really beautiful, actually. He's telling him, you will never be able to destroy me. Going through all the exiles, 70 of Babylonian, 400 of the Egyptian, and 5 is, that's the 5 millennia of all the other exiles included.
So that's the meaning of that phrase. After that, we will merit fulfillment of the prophecy, and saviors will ascend Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Esau.
So that's from Avadia's prophecy.
He says he has a reference to Obadiah. Alternatively, the letters Garti can be arranged to spell Tanari or that's a given. Tagari, a conflict. Jacob was telling Esau, I stayed with Laban, with whom I shared a conflict. I am a master of strife and a man of war, he said, to frighten Esau. I have sojourned, Garti, the Masoretic note Beit Yud means that this word appears twice in the Tanakh. Once here, and the second time, Arya Li Ki Garti Meshech. Woe unto me for my drawn out sojourn, Psalms 125, because Jacob became fearful of Esau and called him my Lord, despite the fact that the Holy Blessed is He had already promised Jacob, I will guard you wherever you go. He caused his descendants to be exiled sojourners among the nations. All
right, so that's saying that King David, when he says Oyeli Kigarti, is talking about Jacob, saying that he's telling him, I was a stranger. So actually, there's some opinions that say this was a strength, and there's some opinions that say, no, Jacob should own up and say, hey, God said I'll be protected. There's no reason to be a sojourner. Now, actually, in the Shar B'tachon, it says a lot of times when we are weak, a lot of times when we feel weakness, so it drags out our mission because God shows you, okay, you're going to be weak. Watch, I'm still going to take care of you if you're weak. It's just going to take longer. In other words, the more you believe in God, the more you believe that God will take care of you, the quicker God is to do it. Because there's two ways of learning that God is in control. One way is the easy way, where you study Torah and then you know God's going to take care. And the other way is the hard way, where you try all sorts of other things, and God needs to show you, if you put this enemy or you put this person, you give him power, I'm going to show you that the power you think he has isn't really power. So that's the long, dragged out way. So
That's a long, shorter, no, that's a short and long way.
well, that's the long, longer way. Well,
long,
so the
long.
truth is sometimes, as humans, we often put power into physical things or different forces out there. And when we know that nothing has power except for God, then, God can just wipe those things out. But when we think those things have power, a lot of times God shows us that they have power and then shows us that they don't have power.
It's like a false prophet.
So the advantage of that is when you learn things the long way, you're able to tell your kids and say, "Oh, don't even try that. I tried it," and it's able to be more understood. But when you do things the upper way, which is obviously better, where you automatically know nothing has power, some people might say, "Hey, you never were in my situation." So that's so it is kind of longer, shorter way, shorter, longer way. Jewish people, we've done exile the long way, and
kidding.
we've learned the long way, and so either way, Mashiach should come because we've learned the long way, and we also know the short way now after the long way, and so hopefully in our little battles we'll do it the short way where we're able to study Torah first and know that nothing in the world has any power. That will give strength in our lives, give strength to the government in Israel, and usher in the era of Mashiach. Yeah. Have a great day, great week.
So no davening.